So let's come back with the challenges. First, let's talk about the challenges of that office. We know they have been belittled. The parliament has sometimes demonized them. Government, you remember the time, the corruption summit, the way they were given an address down on what they should do, what they are not doing right. But challenges, let me begin from...
What I remember, actually, you put it right. I think for Ouko, his office, like she said, there was, he was able to bring and sensitize the office that people realize, wow, there's such a big and critical office like this, the Auditor General. And remember the time where actually MPs, if you may recall, were actually looking to oust him. They wanted him gone. So I believe that was actually one of his lowest moments, and then there was a time he was told, was it a procurement vault? He was told he didn't follow the procurement regulations properly. I remember that also came out in Parliament. And I also remember there was a statement he made in regards to Eurobond. And actually, the president and government actually came...
They were very angry at him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Came quite hard
when he said the money, he doesn't know if the money was in the country.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you remember actually the president pronounced himself to an extent of saying, wow, are you putting it in such a way as if we've colluded with the likes of Chase Manhattan to swindle? And it actually made the president very edgy. So these are some of a few things that our good friend Wanauka has been able to go through. But all in all, he still persevered, given the fact that he was running a very critical docket. And I remember at some point, given that the MPs had come and really attacked, and even governors had come to really attack his office, just very recent, when reports came out that there were money sent to the Somalia government for State House something, and it was an issue with IFMIS. You remember how it came down to him that his office was actually coming up with fictitious audits, and virtue of that, some of his auditors in the office were actually...
We had Kiambu County complaining, Nairobi County complaining about some of his auditors.
And I said some of his auditors were corrupt. Yes. And he said that's when he started pushing for the amendment of the Public Audit Act, where he was saying it is actually not bad for the office of the Auditor General to have an oversight board.
Okay.
And he actually said, let us look for people within the private sector, parliament. So at the very least, some of these functions are provided or have another oversight entity that is able to look into them. So I remember he had both lows and highs, and I believe those three were actually probably, if he was to come here, he would tell you those are some of the lowest moments.
And Michelle, I'd like to know, in a country where corruption fights back, and I'm coming back to you and Simeha to talk to me, how difficult was he working in a country that corruption fights back every element that he would want to do? And all this were captured in his reports. But Vincent Udori is back with us. Vincent, apologies for the technical hitch we had earlier, but tell us what's happening at the NAT headquarters. When do we expect the press conference?
Right now the situation has really calmed down. As you can see behind me, there are security officers here who were called in to just make sure nothing went or nothing goes wrong here. Basically, the situation has been calm since morning. They had here in the morning, but what is happening is a number of teachers have come here and they have been camping outside the NAT offices, demanding the office to be open, because remember the Secretary General Wilson Sossion had announced that the office had been closed until 3rd September, and this is something that has not gone down well with a number or a section of teachers representing the other side of the divide, because there are two groups of teachers who have arrived here. One group wants Sossion to continue being the Secretary General of NAT despite being a nominated member of Parliament, while the other group wants Sossion to relinquish that position, abandon it, because is now, they're saying is now partisan, having been nominated by ODM party to join Parliament, and they are saying that position of the Secretary General should be taken by somebody else. Another thing that has really come out is the issue of the registration of Sossion by TSC, because they are saying now that Sossion has been deregistered, he is not supposed to continue being the Secretary General. While Sossion had said there were a section of members of the National Executive Council wanted to hold a meeting to remove him from office illegally, while other teachers are arguing that only a legal NEC meeting can suspend Sossion, and that suspension can only be ratified by the annual delegates conference. And therefore, there are a number of issues happening here. But right now, let me just speak to one of the NAT officials who is here. Basically, tell me, what are your issues? What do you really want to happen or not to happen as we see what is happening right now here at the NAT headquarters?
First, let me introduce myself. I'm Mr. Tofoko, the NAT Executive Secretary, formerly Larger Kakamega, but now Kakamega North. We have had issues.
Just continue here. What has been the problem? What makes you people unhappy to the point that you come here and camped outside the NAT office this morning?
Our main problem is that our colleague, the Secretary General, has been very evasive whenever we want to talk to him and reason together as brothers to see what ails us in education, especially we who belong to the TSC. So there's come a problem where the CBA cannot be honored, where our teachers are getting interdicted out of orders that are not based on the resolution of the NEC or the steering. We have had 208 teachers interdicted. They have never been talked to, they have never been cared about, and it comes out that whatever our colleague is doing, he is working as a lone ranger without consultations, without involvement, without letting others participate. So it has put him on a collusion course with all the other government agencies that are involved in course in education.
We know Sossion right now is a nominated member of parliament, and recently we saw TSC deregistering Sossion as a teacher. What do you make of it, and what do you want looking at those actions moving forward?
By law, it is wrong for you to belong to a trade union, especially by the constitution of Kenya National Union of Teachers, by our traditions and customs of 1989, and we have conducted our secular politics away from the NAT politics, to be representing teachers to the employer against the government in place. So when Sossion became a nominated member of parliament against our constitution, the NAT constitution, the TSC Act, the Code of Regulation, the Electoral Act, he got himself into trouble. Our colleagues, the NEC members, called him when he was first nominated, before he was sworn in. They called him. After discussion, they sent him outside. They agreed on a principle. When he came in, he was told, they have even a minute here, he agreed he was going to remain as a NAT Secretary General and relinquish the position of the nomination because of conflict of interest, because all the laws governing election and the running of affairs of the teachers were not in tandem. In the evening, today, he ghosted everything. He said he was not going anywhere, and at that time, the Minister of Labour, Madam Kantiye, that is 2017, deregistered all of those trade union officials who were in Parliament against the law. Then the TSC also followed suit by asking him to show cause why in 7 days, which he didn't reply. So by the time he replied, when I go through the submissions he gave, they were vague and wrong submissions, and he was dismissed by the TSC. He took the TSC to court on the 19th of February last year. The court found him on the wrong and gave the TSC authority to deregister him. Do you know what it means?
Okay, thank you so much for now. We'll continue that. But if you can just allow me to talk about the incident that had happened earlier. There were two guys who were arrested by police officers, and basically they are saying they were a number of youth or goons who were trying to cause trouble around the offices of NAT offices, and they're saying they are not teachers, they were just a number of youth or some 2 or 3 guys who were arrested. And while speaking to the police officers, they said that they were trying to cause trouble, and they believe they are hired goons who've been sent here to try and cause trouble outside the NAT offices. But for now, everything is calm and the situation is calm, and the teachers are continuing camping outside the NAT offices. And remember, some are saying there is a particular meeting going in, but we haven't been able to verify which kind of meeting. Some are saying it is an NEC meeting going on. And the issue of to do with press conference, we've not had anything to do with press conference, that they are going to have any press conference here right now. And therefore we'll continue camping here to see how the situation unfolds and to capture to you everything that will happen moving forward from now. Back to studio.
Right, Vincent, definitely you will get us the details of that meeting that is currently going on inside the NAT headquarters, and probably that press conference will be forthcoming. But I guess the gentleman did not have his facts right, especially the fact that he said that Wilson Sossion, having been nominated to Parliament, cannot hold both positions. I think that's fundamentally wrong.
Yeah. It is wrong, and they forget that, since independence we've had trade unionists, represent the interests of the labor movement in Parliament, and it's never been against the law. So maybe he can talk about their constitution, if there's something in their constitution that forbids someone to be a Secretary General and an MP at the same time. They would know
which
that.
does not exist, because I sat with Sossion here and he said it doesn't exist.
But then just a minute, Sossion has been an MP since immediately after elections. Are they just realizing it? that he's an MP?
Exactly.
Right now.
And he's been serving them for about, we are headed on to 3 years now, two plus.
Yes.
And then suddenly they are realizing that he's acting against the law. They're also a joke. The problem with a lot of this, with our teachers, which is unfortunate because it's been created by the way in which this society treats teachers. The approach to things is very transactional. That if they see that they are being told you'll miss an increment of 5,000 shillings, it is such a big thing. It is important. But then you can be patient and sacrifice for bigger things than start running away from your union just so that you can ensure that you get this 3,000-4,000. But I do understand why it's important. It's because of the way our society has treated teachers, that it becomes, really hustling, that you don't see how you'll miss that 3,000 or 4,000 shillings, and that alone will make you run away from your union and go and join Coopet so that you can just make it. But as Gabriel was saying earlier, you'll also see them trooping back to NAT.
To NAT, yes.
When NAT will negotiate something.
Because NAT is bigger. That is bigger. Yeah. And NAT got some protection, if you remember, Michelle, when they joined Kotu. You remember that? Yeah, so they got some protection from Kotu. And I'm wondering why Francis Atwoli has not come out clear on this.
He's spoken, actually.
He's spoken the matter of NAT.
He's faulted what is happening, and he said that the Ministry of Labour and Kotu should come in and mediate, because this will destroy, the education sector, the teaching fraternity, and so on. It's not really, it should be moved away from individuals.
Okay. Yes.
We will all lose.
And I actually support what Semeka said earlier on. I think if it was, I don't know whether it was still off camera, Semeka actually alluded to the fact that these things should not be playing in the public gallery.
Boardroom, full stop.
It's mediation. What needs to happen instead of this is something very different from the other groupings that we see. These are teachers. These are people who are actually given the mandate to be teaching our young ones. They should actually be setting the example, not to see that where they are meeting there are police involved. So at the very least, there should be an element of a boardroom discussion and an agreement. Whether you're talking about the CBAs and whatever have you, everything that I know that will work to the betterment of education and our children is something that will follow an orderly process. Throughout history, chaos has never produced order. So I don't know how we can do.
The plan to produce order with this chaos.
Yes, exactly. It can never happen. It has never happened. And it's also good to remind them, like again, what Semeka said. So Zion has been an MP close now to
2 years and a half. Why now?
Have they noticed now that this?
Even for TSC, have you just noticed that Sossion shifted to Parliament and now you want to do register him? All right, let's come back to our discussion. We'll try and end with that a little bit later on. But Michelle, in a country that corruption fights back virtually in every sector, these guys, or Edward managed to outmaneuver them, or did he?
Well, personally, I wouldn't say that he did, but there's the whole idea of the Office of the Auditor General is good on paper. It's good theoretically. Like if we were supposed to look at the Office of the Auditor General operating on its own independently, it is something that would actually make a lot of sense.
If we allowed it to operate, I think that lack of independence, Parliament threatened to cut the budget for Auditor General's office. You know, how do we ensure? How can that mischief be addressed? That Parliament, the Auditor General's office does not answer to Parliament in terms of funding, probably in terms of accountability, so that Parliament they are able to draw the line that when it works, and it doesn't think, oh, if we victimize Parliament, they will do this the next day. How do we ensure that?
For me, I would say, well, the issue is most of the time this mischief comes from people who actually have something to benefit.
An interest.
People who have vested interests from one way or another. That's why they stifle the office of the Auditor General. So I wouldn't say there's like a specific recommendation as at now that I can give, but that is something that really needs to be looked into. And probably, well, I saw recently the Office of the Auditor General was doing a social audit accountability for citizens to be engaged in the process of public audit. And it has a different name every time they're calling us to the meeting, so I'm also struggling with that.
What is that supposed to do?
It's supposed to actually allow the citizens to participate in auditing, in the Office of the Auditor General, in auditing the public office.
I'm more confused.
Let me make a comment on that.
Yes.
And in fact, let me perhaps make it public that was one of OCO's best strikes in terms of strategy, working with the public and civil society organizations. He had this strategy, and he was very open to civil society and individual members of the public. You'll remember at one point when Parliament tried to push him out, it's Omtata who went to court.
Yes.
For your information, it didn't happen by chance. It did not happen by chance. He has done a very beautiful thing, that this is a public office. It belongs to you Kenyans. Protect it. It's not up to the holder of the office at that time to protect that office.
Yes.
When these crooks in Parliament are trying to hunt you out of a public office because you are doing a good job, it should not be you fighting for that position, to protect and preserve that position. It should be the public. So he's saying basically that he's trying to promote the fact that citizens should be more engaged. Citizens should know what is happening in public offices in terms of public expenditure, carry out social audits, read those reports of the Auditor General, and do something about those reports, rather than waiting for DCI and Parliament, which will not, as we have seen, will not do anything. Okay. If anything, they will bury those reports deep down. Okay. So he's saying that, and I agree that the ultimate holder of a stick in if you want transparency in public expenditure, it is the citizen. Correct. Yeah. If the citizen is holding this stick, even the MP will know that I step beyond my mandate or I go against the interest of the public, that stick will come down on my head. Okay. And that's what Ouko is trying to promote. I really thank him for the way he has engaged with civil society to ensure that information on the role of the Office of the Auditor General is shared with the public, and invites them to get involved, to use his reports, to invite him to the civil society forums, to speak to the public. Every so often when you see him speak, he's addressing the public and trying to ensure that the roles of this office are known as much as possible, and the public participates in the audit processes.
Okay. See, the beauty of all this is that despite the fact that OUCO is leaving, we have the framework in place. Yeah. The last time we had a meeting on that as civil society organizations, we were validating the framework and the guidelines. They had already done pilot projects in different counties. Okay. So in as much as we still have the vacant issue of we don't know who's going to take up, so we don't know what's next or what's going to happen, at least we know that he's engaged the civil society for the benefit of the public people, so that even if it doesn't come up or it is not addressed in the next near future, then it is something that is definitely not going to go under because it's already in public domain.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out, Gabriel, the kind of a person who will be ideal for this, the kind of individual. Have we found one? Do you have an example of a person that you think can hold that office and take it to the next level?
Honestly, the underlying factor would be credibility. Yeah. If we find, there are many people actually who could actually be credible enough to carry on through the transition, once everything has been put in place. I remember what Ouko had raised of the 33% actually, disappearing, and 33% of our budget actually disappearing and going into corrupt dealings, and that actually gained a lot of traction. So any person coming in must be above board, and realize the elements of credibility and where the Office of the Auditor General is heading. Like we've said here, time and again, Ken, this is a very critical office, and we've realized it. And the fact that you had somebody like Ouko, who kept constantly saying we review the Public Audit Act and involve, even he was ready to, even he himself, when he opened up and saying we need an oversight, and this is where Semaka is saying he actually invited even parliamentarians. They can sit on that board. Civil society can sit in private sector, and one agent, they can sit there. So you also see what they are doing.
Okay.
Very few officers will be open enough
to do that,
to allow such a thing. But here you have somebody who's saying, yes, let us engage. See the kind of work that we do. So when parliamentarians are giving you a narrative that we are such and such, so that you also can be able to see. And that invitation, actually, if we change that Public Audit Act and we are able to have an oversight like that, then I think the person who comes in will not matter, as long as they are above board and they are credible enough.
And you think
we will have
a lot of who can do that?
Oh,
job?
there are so many.
There are so many.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
And just maybe to add on to what he said, I like the idea because it has taken my mind back to when we had the African Public Service Day. And that is when I realized that the President of Kenya had actually launched a Huduma Halisi campaign for celebrating public servants that are actually really good at what they do in the public office. So if we could, we are not saying he's the best. I mean, people always have their own challenges in trying to deliver their deliverables. But if we could have such kinds of public service officers who are actually this open to actually having debates with all the stakeholders and actually being accountable and being transparent, that would be really nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me also add that something I think is important to note. These two officers, Ouko and Agnes, were recruited through competitive processes. And this, a very important or critical aspect in competitive processes where they are led to run their course without undue interference. But look, when you leave an officer who is exiting to exit without starting the process, you want to take control, you want to take back control. Because this process, the competitive recruitment process, should have begun earlier.
Yes. Months before he exits. Because we knew he was leaving.
Yes. Yeah. But you see, when he leaves, then there's a vacuum. Then of course you appoint an acting officer. Unfortunately, this government, in my opinion, hasn't been. You can't accuse it of giving the best minds the public jobs that they ought to be given. You can't accuse it for that. You don't want a public institution to succeed, it will not succeed. How? By you choosing among the most incompetent people and putting them there. Yeah. But when you have a competent and courageous person who you are not happy with because they are exposing your weaknesses, then you have this tendency of wanting to ensure that their successor, you are in control of who comes in, who succeeds them. So that again, consistent with the trend, you put there whoever
gatekeepers or someone.
Absolutely, some kind of gatekeeper, and that is the tragedy of this government. But hopefully, because it's not as if they are there forever. Hopefully, these proposals that Ouko is making and others and what we are discussing here get to inform how we shape these offices, these critical offices, because it doesn't just stop with the law. It's also what we do in our culture as a nation to ensure that we shape these offices the way they should be to work for the public. There is something Ouko said yesterday, the day before yesterday, I think, at the lecture, the public lecture. He said that we should amend the constitution to separate the office of the president from that of the head of government, because when you are auditing government, basically you are auditing the president. Right. And where you have a powerful president who is uncomfortable with being audited, let's just with a public accountability, they will block your work, they will stop you when you are the Auditor General. Okay. I say that's not necessary. The problem is not with the constitution.
The law, yes, the problem
even if you create a separate office, we've seen it in Sri Lanka. President undermining public security because of partisan political interests. So even here, even if you separate, when you are auditing government and it is making the president uncomfortable, even if he's not the head of government,
Yes.
he, with the control over instruments of security, etc., he or she will still undermine. So it's really the culture that we should build in this country, rather than say again, amend the constitution. I laud Ouko for standing up to the president and saying, look, this is the right thing. You may refuse, you can stop me, but the public ought to know.
You can humiliate me in public.
Yes, you can humiliate me, but the public ought to know that this is the right thing for them. And then he leaves it for the public and their representatives.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not so much about that let's change the law, but it's the role we as the public must play, the demands we must make to ensure that we shape those critical offices that exist for public accountability.
Okay, and for posterity.
Yeah.
Is this the first Auditor General's office under the new constitution restructured?
It is.
It
Yes.
was
That's
the
the first. Yes.
All right, we have about 3 minutes on the clock, and I'll give you your closing remarks on what we'd like to see going forward with this, especially these two offices. The person holding the office of the control of budget is not substantive.
Correct.
And in my mind is the Commission on Revenue Allocation.
Yes.
It's also an independent of it. But see how it's been undermined to the extent that its recommendation on the division of revenue has been
ignored.
completely ignored.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yet their sole mandate in this country as that commission is to bring this formula to the fore and help Parliament reach this. So I'm thinking about that. So even as you wind up,
Can very quickly,
Yes.
and I don't know where we got this bad habit, or so I call it, where we don't give institutions goodwill. We always think of the most nauseating thing every time we are approaching a critical office. And all thing we need to do, is give them goodwill. Like what has happened with the office of the EACC and the office of the DPP, right? And that's why you're seeing when you give such officers goodwill, they are able to perform. Both these individuals have raised issues that are quite pertinent that we need to look into. When somebody like Ouko raises an issue of people, we need to have a way of dealing with matters, whether it's through changing the public accounts bill, or whether it's through talking about transitioning into such critical offices. I mean, this is something that should have known a year ago. So here, even on the control of budget, we have to get an officer within the department instead of having put infrastructure and systems whereby now we'd already have had an ideal person taking over.
a substantive, not an acting
exactly.
capacity. Yes.
No, yeah, exactly, not on acting capacity, where you have a good transitional mechanism and knowing what to follow so that you can sieve into these other individuals' tenure. We do not need gray areas at this point. Like Simoka pointed out, when you've allowed that space, you will know what will happen before. So that will be asking, when did this happen? Was it during Ouko's tenure or was it before?
So yeah, I understand. Michelle, you have 30 seconds to.
Well, 30 seconds.
Yes, we're out of time.
Just maybe to further sensitize on what he said and what Ouko's suggestion is to separate the office of the Auditor General from the office of the President. It will also help to depoliticize. It will help to depoliticize what is going on at the moment. So that would be really nice, because that would be good for delivery of honest public service. And I think that is what we need. Yeah.
All right, Simeha.
I think the bigger problem is the failure of governance and leadership. The problems, when you see weaknesses undermining public institutions and so on, you don't just look at those institutions and stop there. You must look further. And the problem is with the political leadership of this country, the failure of political leadership and the failure of our politics. We as citizens must come in and cure that. Unless we cure that, these diseases of ineffective public offices or weak public offices or undermining public offices will remain chronic. And then secondly, and perhaps finally, what we talked about earlier, the exaggerated sense of entitlement. We must stop it in this country. People thinking that once they've been in an office, that it's their office forever. That even when they are leaving, you must kick them out. And even when they are out, they think that they want to come back and control that office. We must stop that thing.
This is a discussion for another day. Yes.
I saw on NTV or Twitter handle that the police went to capture someone on a tree in Vihiga so that so that they can count this person.
Yes.
I have been waiting in my house.
Yes.
Do I need to go to a tree
for you to be counted?
For me to be counted?
You need to find your chief.